friends, and welcome to this week's episode of Learning for Good. I am so excited to have a guest on this week's episode. So you may remember this month we've been talking about leadership assessments, and in our first episode on this topic, we talked about 3 different types of assessments that you can use. We talked about the strength assessments, the diversity assessments, and competency assessments. As you may also know, I like to invite nonprofit leaders and others onto the show to join me and share their experiences with learning and leadership development topics. And that's why today I am so excited to have a special guest, Dr. Hedy Lemar Walls, who is here to break down the good, bad, and the ugly of diversity assessments. Now, I know that this organization has used the Intercultural Development Inventory, or IDI, for quite some time. They've used this assessment internally with staff and externally as part of the learning experiences that they provide to other organizations to advance DEI work. So I know that Dr. Hedy Lemar Walls is going to have so much value to share with us today. I can't wait. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. All right, so we have Dr. Hedy Lemar Walls here with us today, and Hedy serves as the Executive Vice President, Social Responsibility for YMCA of the North, and also provides leadership to the United Health Group Equity Innovation Center of Excellence. I love having nonprofit leaders on the show to share, what they're learning, what they're doing. It just gives us all a little glimpse into how other organizations are operating or navigating common learning and development needs and challenges. And so, Hedy, I'm so excited for you to be here today and to talk about the IDI, the Intercultural Development Inventory, which we will get into here in just a few moments. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So before we dive in, Hedy, I'd love for the audience just to get to know you a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about you, your career journey, and what you're doing with the Equity Innovation Center of Excellence?
Well, thank you and good morning. My journey actually began as a new graduate out of college from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I went K-12 there as well as college there in Baton Rouge. And at the end of my college days, really understanding how difficult it is for a particularly African-American person, and with me being a female, to get a job that I would say had a livable wage during that era. And this was in the 70s. Civil rights was booming, everything was going well, but it was clearly not changing, maybe at a rapid pace for those of us that were coming out in the early 70s out of college. My mother, thanks to my mother, encouraged me to go to graduate school, and I was fortunate to get a full ride to go to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. So going to graduate school there and getting an MBA, I was offered several jobs, which was totally opposite than what it was coming out of Southern University, and chose to go into a financial institution as an internal auditor. At the same time, I had 3 children by that time and was really trying to navigate work and kids and childcare. Through that effort, though, I decided to stay home. So I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. And in that 10 years of staying at home, I began to shift my way of thinking from being in corporate America to actually going into education. And because of that, I had a wonderful mentor who encouraged me that I needed to get more education in order to advance in education. And that was my career pathway, and going from an MBA to a specialist degree and then to EDD in education. The efforts and the experiences and the opportunities really impacted on my thought patterns, as well as understanding really having a much deeper understanding of the inequities that were happening in the world. I mean, think about it, as a kid growing up in civil rights and having a home and two parents the entire time, very successful mother who was a school teacher and my dad who was a contractor. I didn't have to think, even though we were in a segregated community, it was different. Coming into being as an adult, being in Minnesota and having to begin to really deal with the inequities as an adult made a vast difference in my mental models and way of thinking. And it took me on a trajectory that I'm still on today as it relates to understanding biases and social injustices, racism and systems that have been in play, history, where we have been and where we are now, and looking at everything from the murder of George Floyd to everything else that's going on in the world, and particularly seeing Minnesota and the Twin Cities actually having to brace through all of the social and racial unrest has brought me to this point in time where I am feeling that I can bring forth some support and understanding and supporting people in really challenging their own mental models. I had to challenge mine. Growing up in a racist society, I had to do a lot of challenging of my mental models. And so understanding what it means to have to work through those processes is a way of life. And it doesn't just stop at any point in time. This is the way it will be the rest of my life, at least. And I can understand how people have to struggle through those challenges as well and become more self-aware, because the key is self-awareness, which leads me to the development and the creation of the United Health Group Equity Innovation Center of Excellence. As we were engaging in conversations at the YMCA of the North and really going out and talking to communities, what's working, what's not working, what do you need? So looking at the why, shifting its mental models from doing for a community to partnering with the community and working alongside a community. That was a huge shift in culture, and beginning to really understand where do we as an institution need to go as it relates to how do we show up in particular communities of color, as well as how do we work with. And that was challenging at best. So after the murder of George Floyd, our work just ramped up. We began to realize that there was immediate needs, long-term needs. Organizations are trying to figure it out. And there's no quick fix to any of this. And having that understanding that we're in it for the long haul. So whatever work that has to be done, we need to commit to it not being a check the box, but being work that we all have to come together on and really be vulnerable to open ourselves up to want to learn more, learn from each other, increase our intercultural competencies as it relates to who we are, and in relationship to understanding how others are who are different from us.
Oh, that's great, Hedy. Thank you so much for sharing both your journey from childhood, college, to your MBA, staying at home, and then transitioning back into getting your EDD, taking the education field by storm, and then moving into your role now, and being able to really kind of take all of the things that you learned across that time and use that as you're building relationships with people within the community, and thinking through what kind of services the United Health Group Equity Innovation Center of Excellence can provide, as you all are doing that as well. So I know that you all are providing, one of your services is the Intercultural Development Inventory, or the IDI, which is what we're here to talk about today. But can you give us kind of a snapshot of everything that you all provide to clients?
Yeah, thanks for that. The United Health Group Equity Innovation Center of Excellence is a service provider for all. which means we work with all institutions, organizations, government, county, the looking at corporations, nonprofits, faith-based. We are made up of a very, very culturally diverse group of facilitators that are here to not tell anyone what to do, but to literally engage in what I call learning experiences. We do not do training. Training is not something that we do. We recognize the fact that training does not work in this DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion space. It is about creating learning paths and opportunities for people to engage deeper in understanding who they are, along with understanding how others are. Not that you have to think any differently, but how do you interact interculturally? The facilitation skills are of such a nature that it creates opportunities for people to learn and grow at their own pace. It doesn't matter where you are on this continuum. It is about giving you that opportunity to learn, engage, challenge your mental models, understand in history why we are where we are currently and how it's impacting the systems that are in place. How do we recognize systems? How do we begin to have systems, models and systems change so that we can really begin to understand what is needed and to begin to make changes that will ultimately impact the future of any organization or people. So the center is a place for growth, for learning, for identifying our own biases, understanding cultural agility and how we interact with others, and therefore beginning to not only understand, but what changes and commitments can we make to make a difference. So the United Health Group Equity Innovation of Center of Excellence is here to support, to serve, engage, and allow you as individuals to begin to grow and learn at your own pace.
Great, thank you for that. So the IDI is one of the tools that you all use. You mentioned self-awareness, understanding one's own bias, and some of the conversation so far. I do know the IDI, so I know that that is part of what the IDI does, but tell us a little bit about how you are using the IDI.
So we highly recommend through this center that any organization that works with us considers starting with the IDI first. And the reason being is IDI provides baseline data that's rich and deep in understanding each individual and what they are contributing and bringing to the conversations. Now, a lot of organizations don't really understand the IDI and literally become afraid of it, thinking this is about me showing up as a racist. No. This is not about any racial anything. This is about how are you showing up in an intercultural setting. And here, let me be very clear about this. We all have culture. Everybody, every individual comes from a culture. So there's no misunderstanding that no one has culture. We all have culture. The key is, how is my culture different from someone else's culture, which is different from someone else's culture? And we're all coming to work in this group setting. So really the IDI is it's an amazing tool for really understanding how am I interacting in this intercultural setting with those who may look like me and those who may not look like me. What is my mental model saying and thinking? How am I engaging in conversations, or even how am I making decisions based on people providing input that I don't agree with? How do I take in what they're saying, listen, engage in the conversation to better understand, before I start making decisions that impact those who are part of our group who may or may not be the same as I am.
Great. So it gives them some data, some insight into how they're showing up, how they're having those interactions, and how they're making decisions. They get that data, and then what happens?
The goal is for each individual that goes through the process to really take it serious enough to want to make change. So one is, first of all, which is challenging, is accepting the results. And most people that take it see themselves at a higher level of engagement in an intercultural setting than they actually are. So one is accepting, here's where you are on this continuum, and it is research-based, very scientific in nature. So it's pretty accurate. Here's where you are, and let's talk about, which is part of the consultant, one-on-one individual consultant, is to talk about how did you get here? What was your thinking? What was your childhood like? What was your engagement in peers? Because a lot of times, once people begin to think about how they grew up and their peer engagement, then automatically it's like, okay, light bulb goes off. Okay, I get it. Then the next part is understanding, now what? What do I do with this understanding? So the IDI provides a tool for planning and learning and engagement to help you grow through the process. What we ask is that, one, you take the time to develop a plan, an individual plan, and then number two, you have someone that will hold you accountable so that you can stay true to what it is that you want to do and how you want to do it. If you continue in that growth pattern, then what we should see is some results as relates to behavior, attitude, how you're engaging with those who are different from you, how you're making decisions differently, how you're interacting differently than you might have. And even though there's a continuum for the IDI, it doesn't matter where you are on that continuum, there's always room for growth, regardless of how your assessment ends.
You're speaking my language, continuous growth. So, okay, so they take the assessment, they get those results. Hopefully they, are able to process those results, come to acceptance with that. They get a session to kind of debrief what's happening, what they're seeing, why they might be where they are along that continuum. And then they're creating a plan to develop in whatever way makes sense for them based on those results. So tell me a little bit about what successes have you seen with using the IDI, or challenges, because growth is hard, behavior change is hard. So what have you seen that's going really well, and what have you seen that's maybe a little bit challenging for people as you're implementing this?
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. We have internally, I'll use the Y of the North. Internally, we started this process of all leaders taking the IDI for the first time in 2018. And this year, 2022, we decided to do a retake. So we wanted all of the organizational leaders to do it for a second time. Now, given the fact that there are a lot of changes within leadership, people have coming, new people on board, what we saw as an organization is that there was growth. And for us, anything with a 5% growth, we just think that's just awesome, right? And so even though we were at a point in time when we first took it, we have moved the needle forward. And so that was really, really said a lot for us, even though we had new people as part of that. One of the individuals, though, that was part of this group literally went from a lower score to 20-some% higher. That is significant growth. And when I talked to this individual about how, we don't see that normally. So help me understand what happened, what did you do? And what she said is, I worked my plan. I was very intentional. I was determined. I was going to move this needle for me. And I went full forward with it. And it showed up in the results. Another group organization that we worked with was one that literally went through a reckoning of, this is a group of all white organization, both male and female, but just didn't understand what was happening. So we went through the process with them, and what they realized is they were so all the same. They needed to get outside of themselves. And so collectively as a group, they started going into communities of color and engaging with them very intentionally, as well as socializing with them. So they made it a regular date once a week that they would go in and just engage and be present and build those relationships. They have built a level of trust as never before. And now they're talking about the results they're seeing because the trust is there. So one of the great byproducts of this whole process is building trust and increasing trust. And you know, when you increase trust, work can happen, engagement can happen, results can happen. The downside sides of this, you know, when things don't work well is when people are not held accountable, they are not working their plan. And what you're seeing is more of the same, if not an increase of the same. The culture is stagnant. People are still doing what they've always done. And in some organizations, because there is such a long, deep history, because there are people in leadership position holding on to those historical perspectives, change cannot happen. And so what you'll see is the same, just same of the same. And so it is imperative that one, you really create an accountability structure within the IDI process. Not that people have to say where they are on the continuum, because it is an individualized, it's constructed to be individualized. So people have their own information, and the way you share it is if you share it, because we don't, as QA, share it. However, it's important to look at it from a group perspective, to understand how do we mobilize as a group, and how do we work together as a group, and how do we increase our growth and learning.
So I love the two examples that you shared, the successes, the internal, to see the internal results increase overall, but then the individual leader to increase that much their intercultural competence, that's huge. And I think sometimes we look at things like the assessment process and the development planning process, right? And 4 years-ish, right? You said 2018, and then now it's 2022. So in about 4 years, they moved 20 points further along the continuum. 4 years probably seems like a really long time when you're in it, right? But looking back, that's a huge increase. And it's going to make such a difference for that individual, for the interactions that person has, for the trust that they're going to build within the organization, and even in their personal lives. Mm-hmm. So I love that example, a very individual example across 4 years. And then the other one that you shared, the organization that is now building trust with the community, I think that's huge too, because they're seeing organizational impact. And it's because individuals are committed, but they're building trust across cultures because they're taking the action, because they're trying to implement the behavior change from the results that they got. So those are both really good examples, and everything that we do really comes down to individuals making a difference, making an impact, making a change, but it can impact the entire organization, and in some cases even impact the people that we're serving. So I love those examples. Thank you so much for sharing those. Is there anything else that you would want people to know about the IDI before jumping in or getting started?
I just think it's important that people understand it is only looking at intercultural relationships. For some reason, people just feel it's about race. It's nothing to do with race. It really is understanding how you engage with others who are different from you. And two is work the plan. There's so many items listed in the individualized plan that gives you so many opportunities around activities or engagements and programs and resources. And so I just think it's so important to really pay attention to the plan and work the plan.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Hedy. And thank you for joining me today on this episode of Learning for Good. It was so nice to have you here. I'm a big fan of yours and really excited that you were able to share what you're seeing from the IDI. So thank you. Thank you for all the work you're doing at the United Health Group Equity Innovation Center, as well as at YMCA of the North. And just so excited to hear from you today. Thank you again.
Thank you.
We have so much that we can learn from each other, and it's one of the things that I hope to bring to all of you, my Learning for Good listeners. I love having other leaders, other consultants, other industry experts on the show to share what they're seeing, what they're doing, and what they're learning as we navigate all of the learning and leadership development topics that are urgent for us and important for us as we are developing our staff. So if you're looking to develop your staff now, go ahead and head over to my website and let's work together to develop the skills your people need so you can scale your mission and your impact, even in a virtual world. Thanks, everyone.